All right, so this week we're talking about gratitude again,
Mm.
and the great thing about gratitude, it takes the focus. Look at me here. It takes the focus off of me or off of us. So some of the pain points that go along with that statement is sometimes we forget to say thanks to the important people in our lives, right? And so
Mm.
again, it's taking that focus off of us by saying thankful. You're thankful for something, or thank you for this, or recognizing that. And that seems like it's not a huge issue, but there are quite a few egomaniacs out there that love to stay, not just be, but stay in the center of the spotlight.
Uh, yeah, I mean, recently my new favorite phrase is main character syndrome, and it's this idea that you think you are the main character of book, movie, video game, whatever, and everyone else around you is an NPC that is only designed to further your story, and a lot of people
What,
suffer
what,
from that.
what is that acronym? MP what?
NPC, a non-player character.
Ah, that would be me apparently.
But so main character energy strives for the limelight of like they really don't care if they cut people off in traffic, they cut you in line at Starbucks or whatever because well they're the main character of the story and you're just a bystander.
Mm,
And so that often stems a lot from a struggle with gratitude because they don't feel the need to thank people. And I think the interesting thing about this is that we've really talked a lot about maybe thanking strangers or maybe bystanders around us in the
sure.
previous episodes here, but this one we're going to talk more about like family members and community and your church family or whatever. And that may be more difficult for some guys
Mm,
because that's being vulnerable with people who know you personally.
sure.
You may be way easier to be vulnerable with someone that you're going to wave at, smile, say thank you, and then never see for the rest of your life. And it's much more difficult to have a emotionally vulnerable conversation about how much you're thankful for your spouse or your kids or your parents and have to look them in the eye tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. I mean, being a dad of two, I had to kind of communicate that to both you and Noah
Mm.
at one point in your childhood of, you know, it's polite to say thank you for things.
Mm.
It is my duty to be your dad and mom to be your mom and provide and all that kind of stuff. But a thank you goes a long way. And I think it's many times it's unintentional. You're just so used to, you put on your right shoe, you don't like look around and say, oh yeah, I forgot, there's a left shoe. Right? You just assume that, right? So I
Mm.
think that there's times in our family lives that your wife cooks a dinner for the 12,742nd time. I don't think you say thank you that often.
Mm.
Uh, every morning about 9 o'clock, we work for ourselves, so we can kind of do this, but mom and I have breakfast. And she cooks breakfast after she works out, and I always thank her for that breakfast at the end of that session, at breakfast. And I want to make sure that she understands I'm not just saying that. It's not just lip service, and
Mm.
but I truly mean it.
Yeah.
And so it takes effort from a mental standpoint, but also a spiritual standpoint, to remain thankful for those who you've become comfortable with.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, this is always like be getting comfortable. It's one of those areas that happens for a lot of people, couples, family, whatever. Um, but like you said, being intentional about it and making sure the other person knows it's not lip service. Because I know plenty of people who thank you has become ingrained into their being so deeply that it's
mhm,
almost like reflexive, and it's not
sure,
really being said with the gratitude behind it. It's more just like open the door, thank you, and then walk through it kind of thing.
right.
And so being intentional, and I know for my wife, I've had to like sometimes like I say thank you, and then I'll like wait for her to look at me and say I really appreciate that, or
Right, right.
follow it up with something else to make sure she's paying attention because that can go the other way too. People hear thank you so much, and then they tune it out.
Sure, sure. And I think when you start to dial into, I know I do, when I start to dial in and say thank you and show, gratitude and that kind of thing, maybe selfish of me, but I start to expect that back in some regard, right? And so that next point is, do you have relationships that are off balance, right? Maybe you and your spouse. Maybe you always say thank you. That person never says thank you. That person's not a monster, but I do think that it maybe requires a conversation to see where you guys are.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that person didn't grow up that way, or maybe that person heard it so much it's hollow.
Yeah.
You know, the words "I love you," you know, get abused in so many ways. Your lips are for me, but your heart's so far from me.
Yeah.
You know, and so gratitude isn't just a word; it's a lifestyle that can make you and your spouse and your family both healthier and happier. Definitely happier.
Yeah.
I think, you know, if you want to test this theory, next time your wife does something, don't comment on it. You might get some feedback. So guys may not do that, but I think it's a healthy relationship when both of you are aware of those type situations and say things like, "Thank you for doing that." Just because we're married doesn't mean I need to take that for granted.
Right. And so one thing on that topic, with the idea of saying thank you, I know for me and my wife, my love language is words, and hers is not. And so for her, she was showing her appreciation in a way that for me didn't fulfill that
Right.
love tank requirement. And so we had to have conversations like, hey, I really want to hear you say, you look good in that outfit, or hey, I really appreciate what you do or work for us, putting bacon on the table or whatever.
Bacon.
And but having that conversation wasn't fun. I mean, it wasn't like
Sure.
Hey, let me talk about my grievances today.
Right.
But it's an important conversation to have, even if say you both have love languages of words and just not being said.
Right.
Because one thing I've learned is people can't read your mind. So lazy of them, I know. But
Thank goodness I can't read my mind.
but one thing I realized is I can just have that conversation and talk about that instead of hoping that she somehow understands that I want an attaboy,
Sure.
and just being very vulnerable and upfront about that. And that goes across, spouse, girlfriend, family, other men in your church groups and everything in between. But I think as guys, we struggle the most with being emotionally vulnerable in those situations and trying to connect and have conversations of that because it's uncomfortable.
What a great segue into our first discussion point about family, the prodigal son, right? You know, that son didn't seem to be very thankful for his situation.
Nope.
Thought he could do better elsewhere, and off he went with his inheritance. And so, it took him standing in the pigsty. Now, that probably is where most of us have to get before we realize something is wrong. The house has to be on fire before you're like, oh, yeah, I probably should have done that. And then him going back home, there was some vulnerability there.
Yeah.
There was some gratitude, forgiveness, And so all these things that we talk about, it's never a silver bullet of, all right, guys, here's the magic code. You get grateful, you'll win at life.
Right.
Done, right? This is another piece that's why there's 7, fruits of the Spirit. It's not just one. He didn't
Right.
say, have self-control and you're good.
Right.
It's multiple things. So that's why we're talking about one of these being gratefulness. And so the next one would be is how can we make more time or more quality time for family? What do you guys do for that?
Usually we try to set aside a night a week for like date nights and things like that, or having dinner with the family.
Yeah.
We have found that if we wait for the moment to strike or the feeling to strike, it never happens. It almost you have to be very intentional about setting aside time because there are so many things out there that vie for our attention.
Oh, sure.
TV, bills, work. I mean, the thing is that at certain points you realize that the things that are vying for your attention may not always be bad things. Like, yeah, doom scrolling on TikTok or watching 10 hours on YouTube is bad, but sometimes it's be your job, which is good, and paying bills, which is a good thing, and taking care of dinner or whatever. But when it's all encompassing and it's leaving no room for quality time with family and friends, that's when it becomes a problem. So we've made a real effort to set aside just one night a week, and then just like, all right, we're gonna put the phones away, go out to dinner, have a nice date night. We'll go eat out. It doesn't have to be more fancy.
Nope.
It could be Chick-fil-A, Lord's Chicken again.
Yep.
And just spend time talking about how our day went, how our week went, and vice versa. So I think intentionality is usually our go-to for making better use of quality time. Because if you're not intentional about it, it'll fall down your priority list too easily.
I know you said it doesn't need to be fancy, and you mentioned Chick-fil-A, but you do know there's a deluxe combo, right? Okay, just want to make sure you know that.
With the cheese?
With the cheese. I'm saying it's getting fancy all of a sudden. So is there someone, and this is for everybody in the audience, is there someone in your family that you should be grateful to that you have not been? I'm sure all of us have at least one, if not more, that you're like, you know what, I probably have not been as grateful as I could have been. And you may have reasons. I'm sure we all have reasons for that. But there probably is someone that we could be focused on to be more thankful. And it doesn't need to be something that some hallmark moment. You don't need to make candles together or anything like that, but you can shoot that person a text or, I don't know, use your phone like a phone and call them. Just to say, hey, I was thinking about you the other day. I just wanted to tell you, thank you for always being there in this situation for me. You've been a great friend. You've been a great, person in my life, whatever. So you can guide that up any way you want. Guys are probably not going to be like doing that verbiage, but find what works for you, whether it's the hallway nod or a high five. Find something that works for you. And so, and that leads me to the next piece would be, what can we do to have better balance of giving and taking from our family? Because, there are always going to be givers and takers.
Yep.
And givers always give and takers always take. That sounds like it's a country song. But takers never run out of the ability to take, but givers do get tired of giving. And so that's something that we all probably need to work on of, if you are a giver, not that it's a boundary, you're called to go that extra mile. If it needs your shirt, you give them your tunic as well, Jesus said. But there probably is a good balance for a healthy relationship that may need to be adjusted.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend that our verse is Luke 15:20 through 24, Joshua.
For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found.
Now that is probably verse 20.
Yeah.
But we purposely left that out so you can go read the rest of that yourself. So Luke 15:20 through 24 talks about the prodigal son. And so on the next part of our segment, we'll be talking about work, love, and community. So we'll see you in a minute. Uncommon would like to thank today's sponsor, Wilson Technology Group. At Wilson Technology Group, we're not just an IT vendor. We're your trusted business partner delivering exceptional support, innovative solutions, and peace of mind. One call, one team, all your tech issues resolved. Uncommon would like to thank today's sponsor, Viking Mergers. Sell your business? Viking Mergers and Acquisitions can help. With 25 plus years of experience and 800 successful sales, we're experts in securing maximum value. Get your free business valuation now at vikingmergers.com or call 866-592-9467. All right, welcome back to segment 2. We're talking about work, love, and community. And so gratitude at work can lead to success as it helps us find meaning in our work. Now you work for the family company, so there's hopefully
It's a
there's
loaded question.
some gratitude there. Your boss is super awesome and everything. But do you have friends or even, yourself, do you find sometimes work is a difficult place to show gratitude?
I think it depends entirely on who you're interacting with. Because,
Sure.
this is the downside. It's much easier to be grateful towards someone who's nice to us.
Sure.
It's very difficult to be grateful for a client who maybe be very aggressive or annoying or ignorant, and whatever case may be. But even just being grateful for the job that you have can be difficult sometimes.
Sure.
I have a friend he got out of college about 5 or 6 years ago, and he's been, trying to get into the computer science arena, and he has applied to job after job after job, praying about it, and it's been very difficult for him to get into that field, and he's had to kind of work his way through a bunch of other odd jobs along the way, and he's had to show gratefulness for having that job. May not be the job that he wants.
Sure.
He wants to be in that computer science using his degree, but trying to be grateful every day for the job that he does have, while plenty of people out there don't have that kind of opportunity.
Sure.
It can be difficult sometimes. And I know for me, I've had to really think through of okay, when I go home, I can turn my AC on and be okay. I have food in that fridge if I get hungry. I have money in my bank account to go get gas if I need it.
Sure.
Being grateful for the smaller things that are directly correlated to my job help me be a better employee and do a better job being grateful for the opportunity that it is. Now, is every day going to be peaches and roses? Absolutely not. But I find when I really focus on the gratefulness of the opportunity of the job, I find I do better work, and the results are better for both me and, whatever I'm working on.
Sure, and I think the go-to for many people will be well, if I was paid better,
Right.
I'd be more grateful.
If my paycheck was bigger.
I'm gonna pour some cold water on that, because I think some of us would complain even if they were making $200,000 a year. Your complaints would be different. I don't feel like going to work today. I got enough money in the bank, and I don't want to do that. I don't need to listen to you. I'm rich. I know I'm making $200,000, but in today's world, that's like making 14 cents. So can I get more? It's one of those things that those things never fully satisfy.
Right.
They meet the needs sometimes better than others, but to say there's satisfaction, complete satisfaction, and to be grateful in your job, that's a hard request.
Right. Well, there's so many strings attached to that. There's no bounds to greed, right?
Sure.
You're always gonna. We're humans. We want more. That's just baked into that sinful nature.
Sure.
And so, ain't nothing wrong with trying to get raises and promotions and
Not
stuff
at
like
all.
that. That is, you're providing for you and your family. That's what we're called to do as men of the house. But when it is so soul encompassing that all you care about is getting that next paycheck, getting a
Right.
better paycheck, and not spending time with your family and showing the gratitude for them, that's when it starts getting okay, well, that's an idol in your life.
Right. So I had a friend that works at a financial institution, and he said for a long time, people would simply jump from one job to the other to get a 20% increase on their salary, which is great if you can get it. If you would jump around to here, spend a year or so there, then do the same thing elsewhere. One, if you're that underpaid, I get it.
Yeah.
You need to get something competitive. But it felt like when he was talking about it that it really didn't matter what, say, the original institution, if they paid, say, the competitive value and plus 10%, that person, that employee, still saw an opportunity to move to a different place, the possibility of getting more money. And so, from an employer standpoint, it's difficult to provide for your workforce to a point where they find it, they'd be grateful for that. Because you're always up against, well, just like in everything, there's always a bigger fish.
Yep.
So being grateful, I think at work, it's a win-win for the employee and the employer, and your family too, because you'll go home and it won't be, well, here's what happened today.
Right.
Get the couch out because I got 30 minutes of crazy. And so, I think in a community section, it definitely builds stronger bonds. You have neighbors and friends you live near. I think being grateful or being, just a good neighbor goes a long way. They always say a quiet neighbor is a good neighbor. That's great. But also a friendly neighbor, it goes a long way too. And so every time I cut my grass, I'm always chatting or waving to a friend across the street or next door, because we all have to do that chore.
Yeah.
And so we share our bond over grass. So, our discussion piece here is why is it good to show thanks at work, and then also thanking someone for doing their job. I think it's important for to appreciate your job, but also for your family to appreciate you going to work every day. If you're both work, be thankful that both of you have chosen to work, because there are people out there that I don't want to work and I'm not going to. So when I marry, I'm staying home because Price is Right. It's not going to watch itself.
Gotta brush up on my Price is Right guessing.
Right. So our verse here, Joshua, is Ruth 1:16 through 17.
So we're talking about actions and stuff, and so in Ruth here it talks about where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay.
I think you got to be content with who you're with to make that statement.
Yeah.
And I think gratefulness is one of the parts to that equation.
Yeah. I think when you find that the gratitude is kind of one of the main pillars of your relationships, it is easier to make it a stronger relationship together, because that way on both sides you're appreciated. Of like, I appreciate them and they appreciate me, and all the actions I take are viewed and appreciated.
Right.
Because sometimes it can be hard to keep that up if you feel like it's falling on deaf ears.
Oh, sure. I mean, how many times would you have to say thank you to someone or serve someone that showed zero appreciation or response to that before you would start to say, man, are they even appreciating this? I mean,
Right.
You want to serve like Christ, which has no bounds, right? Unfortunately, I'm not Christ, and so my human nature is going to have a boundary that, good or bad, makes me say, goodness, every time I brought that person food or I did this here, never said thank you. Not that that's why you're doing it, but the human nature in us, I think, it just helps a little bit more that way. So our challenge is each day find the little things to be thankful for. Not just write them down, but tell them to that person that you're thankful. Like you said, they can't read your mind, and so it would make for a much better relationship, whether it be your spouse, your children, co-workers, community. And so, taking time to be thankful, turning that into a habit will be a great place to start.
Yeah. And, it's the little things that we're talking about here, these like 1% changes that can, compound over time. Because once you start getting the habit of doing this, I think everyone will see a huge increase in, receiving gratitude. And, we talk about happiness and joy in these contexts here, but as you kind of go into the season, that focus tends to be a little more on the want and the being, well, I want that. I'm not content with what I have.
Sure.
It's good to keep, ourselves centered, on what God calls us to be, and, to be grateful and have joy in all situations.
Yeah, sure. And so, with that being said, go be uncommon.